Mahoning Valley Historical Society. Unfortunately, our normal host, Bill Lawson, could not be here with us today, so I am here in his stead to introduce our program today. A couple of announcements first off. We have a new exhibit here at Tyler History Center, which is right down in our Youngstown Foundation Community History Gallery. And it's called Preserving Our Past, What's New at MVHS. And it's basically an example of some of the things we've collected over the last 5 years to give you an idea of what, people have been bringing to us, what we've been collecting and keeping to preserve the legacy of our history here in the Mahoning Valley. So feel free to take a look at that on your way out today if you'd like. It's in the lower mezzanine gallery, and we would love to have you take a look at that. Our next upcoming event is the Mahoning Valley Cultural Alliance Dinner, and that will be all about Japan, and will be held May 5th, Monday, May 5th, and you can see Linda, wave at us, for any details about that event if you'd like to attend. It's always a wonderful time and enriching. Our program next month here at Bites and Bits will be Thursday, May 15th, and it is called All Shook Up, Reshaping the Steel Valley in the 1950s. And our very own Dante Bernard, our MVHS museum educator who's on the camera today, will be presenting that program for us. So looking forward to that. But today we have our very own Tracy Manning, who's our curator of education. And she's going to be speaking today on Testing Our Strength, the Steel Valley in the 1940s. So Tracy holds a Bachelor of Arts in Religion and a minor in Civil War era Studies from Gettysburg College. She holds a Master of Arts degree in Applied History from Shippensburg University. And she also studied secondary social studies education in Wilson College. She spent 6 years working for the National Park Service in various parks throughout the U.S., and also as an education, in that role as an education park ranger before coming to MVHS in 2012. So she's been with us for 13 years now. So welcome, Tracy Manning.
Thank you all. Thanks for being here. This is a lovely, fun crowd. So do we have any newcomers in the group today? Folks who've never been here for a program before? Not too many. Okay, that's awesome. But welcome to those who have not. We do this every month on the third Thursday. So please come back as we keep going through the decades. But for today, we are going to be taking a look at the 1940s. And we do have some chairs over on the window if you all want to have a seat. And then if we need more chairs, we can bring them down. So yes, today we're going to be taking a look at the 1940s. I am trying with this program to give you a real slice of life look at what that entire decade was like. So of course we're going to talk about World War II, but we're going to focus on other things as well. So as we go through this, I will tell you, going into our archives, looking at these sources, I could have done 100 presentations with the amount of information that we have. So if you are interested in any of the things I'm talking about today, please come find me. I can get you down to our archives. You can look through these things. I mean, I could have done a full hour-long presentation on General Fireproofing's filing system that they came out with in 1941 because it fascinated me. So when I'm talking about in depth, I mean it. So like I said, we are going to try to just focus on as much of the decade as we can. Think about it like a buffet. We're not going to have too much of one thing, hopefully not too much of another thing, and give you a real idea of what was going on. So if anyone knows me and knows my love of our collection, my favorite thing in our collection are our police records. So I want to kick off this presentation with the first arrest in 1940. And I love it because it was 2 women. And they were arrested for being drunk. So remember, this is going to be New Year's Day, 1940. These are 2 women, and I just like to think They were out having a great time on New Year's Eve, and it extended into New Year's Day, and so they were arrested for being drunk. You can see there, though, that they were out on just a $13 bond, no problem. And we'll finish it with the last arrest in 1949. So that's what's going to bookend this for us today. Alrighty. So just a little background. We're going to head back into 1939 for a quick second. Just to let you know, the war has already begun. So we have been, as a world, marching towards World War II for several years now, in the 1930s. And it was in September of 1939 that Germany, Nazi Germany, finally invaded Poland. And this signals the official start of the hostilities of World War II. Of course, the United States will not be entering for at least almost another 2 years or so from this point, but we know it's coming. So we're already starting to see some attention to this. So just giving you that background, the war has already begun, even by the time we hit the 1940s. But back here, life is really starting to improve coming out of the 1930s and the Great Depression. There's a lot of business and industrial growth in the late 1930s with things like the Works Progress Administration that we talked about with Sean Posey last month. So we're seeing folks get back to work, get back to jobs. We're seeing some life come back following the Great Depression, and we're literally seeing life come back because I found this absolutely perfect photo in a Youngstown Sheet and Tube newsletter. These are the twin girls of Hans Dennis, who was an employee there at Youngstown Sheet and Tube. This is Judith and Jacqueline, born there November 24th, 1940s. Just an absolutely adorable little picture. And these are the kinds of slice of life things that you're going to find in these newsletters. We have General Fireproofing newsletters, we have McKelvey's newsletters, we have Youngstown Sheet and Tube newsletters. So there's so many little moments of life. Now, one of the last major Works Progress Administration projects was the Youngstown Ward Regional Airport. This project takes its roots back to 1937 when William F. Mogg Jr., who was publisher of the Vindicator at the time, he went to Washington to secure the funds for this project. Land is obtained for this, and construction began in June of 1939, and service started on July 1st of 1941. This was both a passenger and a mail service came out of here. So the last major WPA project up there, the airport. This is a really fantastic photo of the airport being built. Now in other transportation news, I thought this was kind of interesting. So the last run of streetcars and trolley cars is finally being phased out by December of 1940. Locally, the last streetcar line is going to run on December 8, 1940. The trolleys have been running for 67 years, and you can see here some of the photos over time of these streetcars finally being phased out. And what they're coming in with are, of course, buses. So Camel is actually going to have a new bus system here, the tram bus service. Using the same railway lines in the outer suburbs, not so much in the city, but in the outer suburbs, using those same streetcar lines. One of our favorite pictures here is right downtown. This is in 1941. This is at the Strand Theater, and you see we've got a couple of shows playing there. Her First Romance with Edith Fellows and Wilbur Evans, and then Riding on a Rainbow with Gene Autry. And you can just imagine your night out, right? You've had the Isleys, you've had the Strand, fantastic night in downtown Youngstown. Now, this is the part of the presentation that I probably love second best. And for those who know me, you're gonna know why. Youngstown Sheet and Tube introduced us to their cat. All right, so this is Tilly. So Tilly showed up at the tube mill at the Camel Works of Youngstown Sheet and Tube. In 1941, they did a full page in their newsletter about Tilly. It's fantastic. Her humans were Tony Staub, Stanley Deputat, and Frank Clement. Hopefully I'm pronouncing those last names correctly. And they absolutely doted on her. These articles are adorable, where they talk about these strong steel men, just like putting down her cup of milk, and just being absolutely addicted to this cat, which I totally understand, right? When Tilly showed up, she had 4 kittens. A few of the office staff took the kittens, and over the next several years, Tilly is the absolute mascot for the Tube Mill at Youngstown Sheep and Tube. So yeah, there's Tilly. We're going to take a real hard left turn from Tilly and head to Pearl Harbor. Because in December 7th, 1941, the Japanese will attack the naval installations of Pearl Harbor and other parts of the Pacific. And locally, the response is going to be shock, just like everyone else across the country had. There are some articles in the Youngstown Vindicator that talk about service members most likely being recalled back to service, especially those who had kind of aged out after the age of 28. They're looking possibly about 100 enlisted men from Mahoning County that would have to come back into the service, joining the nearly 800 enlisted men from Mahoning County that were in the military at the time. Now, everything has a Youngstown connection, as we know, and how many of you knew, I'm sure some of you did know, that the person in charge of Guam at the time was from Youngstown. So this is Captain George Johnson McMillan. He was in the United States Navy, and he was the governor of Guam from 1940 until it was invaded by Japan in December of 1941. He was a graduate of the Naval Academy at Annapolis, and then actually when Guam was captured, he is also taken prisoner, and he will be held prisoner until the fall of Guam in late 1945. So he is held prisoner through the entire length of the war. He will write several reports about his time in prison, about what happens with Guam, and those are all things that you can research as we move out of this. All right, so like I said, everything, right? Everything has a Youngstown connection. Now I found this also in that same December 8th newspaper, 1941. This is an advertisement from the Youngstown Vindicator itself, talking about the importance of news. Just make sure I can read it. And the importance of getting information out to people. You can see there on the screen, it says, the great thing about America and American newspapers is your right to choose what you will believe and whose urgings you will accept, whose products you will buy, and whose policies you will follow. That is the that very right is what freedom is, the liberty of every American to make up his own mind. Then he goes on to call out the fascist governments that we will be facing. In Germany, Italy, Russia, Japan, a government agency decides what people shall read and hear. Not so in America. Do your part to preserve the American way of life. Yeah, exactly, right. All right, so, yeah, I figured that would get that response. Okay, this is from General Fireproofing in December of 1941. This is the back cover of their newsletter. You see here that they're stating we are now united in the defense of our country. Let us all this Christmas season dedicate to our country our every effort for its protection and give our soldiers and sailors, by our working with plants and offices, that support they need and have the right to expect. So we are going to see military messages just left and right and left and right, and I could put 1,000 of them on the screen, from the newsletters, the newspapers, advertisements, magazines, you name it. So I pulled a couple, a few that I really like, including this one. So we'll make this deal to hit Hitler, pan Japan, and must Mussolini. Fantastic. I love a good pun, everybody knows that. So this is one of the better ones. But in a lot of ways, especially early in 1942, life is still kind of happening. We are seeing some efforts heading towards the Pacific, which we'll talk about in a minute, but things are still kind of happening at home, like the Industrial Championship basketball tournament. So General Fireproofing's basketball team won the 1942 competition. They won their championship game, against United Engineering and Foundry Company. We have some great photographs of that here. So these are, like I said, these are the kinds of things you're going to find in those newsletters. Just fantastic pieces of history there with things like that. Also from General Fireproofing, their Easter dance. You see Wick Mackey there, kind of in the middle, playing the live music. This was up at Stambaugh Auditorium. I also just really like how they put that page together with the Easter dance and all the pictures. Nice graphic design there at General Fireproofing. Youngstown Sheet and Tube is going to have their 29th annual picnic at Idora Park. These are some of the photos from that. And again, these are all things in the archives that you can go grab and take a look at. So here in the Mahoning Valley, the war effort had been in full swing since the attacks at Pearl Harbor, with war loan drives being pushed by the local women's division of the War Finance Committee. At Strauss Hirschberg Company, efforts are underway to raise more than $21 million in what became Mahoning County's 5th war loan drive. We're going to jump ahead to June of 1944. And the Vindicator notes that the Women's Division sold several $100s worth of bonds at their 2 booths at the square during this day. There's also an announcement that says bond buyers unable to come to town may send their orders to either WFMJ or WKBN. And police cruisers will make calls once a day at designated addresses to pick up the checks. So everyone coming together for these war bond drives. And we're also going to see advertisements like this with, I mean, I get it, but she's kind of creepy. So you see the advertisement here. So young Americans may never fear the skies, buy your war savings bonds. And what these bonds were is you bought, say, a $25 bond for, say, $18 and maybe 25 cents or 75 cents. And so you would be able to cash in your bond after the war, though that continued with victory bonds and so on. So really encouraging some local investment. This also was a great opportunity for some competition because local industries would fight to have the most employees participate. So we have a note here from the 5th drive, and it says employees of Youngstown Welding and Engineering are backing our government 100%, not only in buying war bonds, but in furnishing essential materials. No ship has ever been delayed by any failure on our part. There's also notes from General Fireproofing that they would try to top the participation from other organizations. So it was kind of a fun competition, who could get the most. Now on the flip side of the fun, you're going to have things like this. So enlistment lists, images in every newspaper, in every newsletter, and so on. And when I mean every newsletter, I mean every single issue of the Vindicator had highlights for soldiers who had enlisted, for women who were serving as waves or WACs or WASPs. And we're going to see these just time and time and time again. So I certainly could not pull them all. So I have a couple of samples throughout the presentation that I will show you. So again, that's all digitized online, and those are all things you can find. So we'll do a little war history here. We're going to head to April of 1942, when Bataan falls, and then we have the what becomes known as the Bataan Death March. So this is the headline there. Just, I can't imagine seeing a headline like that at the time. April 18th of 1942, just over a week later, we have Doolittle's attack in Japan. And then just about 2 months later, we're going to have the Battle of Midway. So pretty much every headline from the Youngstown Vindicator's front page between, honestly, even prior to Pearl Harbor, and then after the war ends in the fall of 1945, almost every headline on the front page is war-related. I really don't recall coming across too many Youngstown Vindicators whose main headline was not officially related to the war effort somehow, whether it was a battle, a political thing, something like that. Well, let's come back to Youngstown, June 22nd of 1942. Again, we are looking at war bonds, victory bonds here, and we have someone quite famous come to town, and that's Marlene Dietrich. Yeah, I know. She drew just a couple people to downtown Youngstown to see her, and people were, just flooding downtown Youngstown. You see her there on the podium there where it says War Bond, thousands of people downtown. Not only did she make the downtown stop, but she tours local factories and mills, talking to people, trying to raise the war efforts. Just wonderful images here. And then the next photo I have, this one's from Youngstown Sheet 2. Here she is there. Just fantastic. Also in Youngstown Sheet 2, this is a photo of their Fourth Liberty Loan, members of the Mechanical and Electrical Department Committee. So that, honestly, we could just do that kind of stuff for hours today. Talk about something else, rationing. All right, so this is one of the ration books that we have in our collection. This would be like the little pocket folder you would put things in. Rationing is going to hit pretty quickly in January of 1942, just weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The first thing rationed are tires, and actually something I found kind of interesting is that in the newspapers following that ration note, if they were selling anything with tires, they would always put pre-war tires. So even on something like a carriage, which we saw for a baby carriage, a stroller, it specifically said pre-war tires. So they knew that they were not using rubber that could be going towards the war effort. But other rationing is going to include pretty much anything you needed to buy. Families would be given points and tickets per person, even babies received them. And then you would have to ration those out over the weeks to get the things that you needed. There are some great stories of kind of a black market of rationing in Youngstown, people kind of trading tickets, kind of some black market food movements underground. So if you're interested in that, I can send you some of those articles. Another one of our favorite pictures, right downtown, is one of the barrels we would see all over the place for scrap metal drives. So these scrap metal drives, they are taking unused and unwanted metal, sending those out to the mills that they can then be recycled into ships, airplanes, and other equipment. You see here at the very bottom there where it says, "Hit Hitler with scrap," which is also just great. But not only are adults getting into these scrap metal drives, so are the little ones. I know. So this is from Youngstown Sheet 2. They have been out there gathering cans. This is Jerry Clemens and Serena McCandless doing their part. You see the caption there. They carried empty cans, cleaned and flattened them, and put them in the scrap barrel, which is just fantastic. And it was Jerry's father who worked at Youngstown Sheet 2. Just wonderful. All right, another thing we're going to see is the local civil defense work. So this is a 2-page spread from General Fireproofing, just talking about some of the different elements that people could work with, civil defense, different things that they could practice and plan for. I don't come across a lot of civil defense things in the research that I did. I think around here we were much more focused on war production, but definitely things for civil defense, especially like this one. We're also going to see great things like these too. I really like the cartoon guy. He's pretty built. Working there with the ladle. I don't think I'd feel safe not wearing a shirt if I was working in one of these mills. But having these types of news articles just talking about what is being produced in the mills, how amping production is going to help. These mills are running 24 hours a day, 3 shifts a day. They never stop working. We also have this other one here. This is I'm a steel worker. Here's how I'm going to win the war. And we would have quotes from different employees from not only the Youngstown plants, but other Youngstown Sheet and Tube locations. So just kind of fantastic pieces there. And again, if you're interested, we can pull those for you to look at them in more detail. We're also seeing things like this. So the enemy is listening. He wants to know what you know. Keep it to yourself. And then the other one there, which is the cover of General Fireproofing's newsletter in May of 1943, "We regret to inform you," somebody talked. So being very pointed by saying, keep your mouth shut. Do not talk about any of the things you know. Don't talk about the steel that's being produced for specific things. Don't talk about locations where your relatives might be serving, because you never know who could be listening. You never know who might be on the other end of that phone call. You never know who might be at the other end of the coffee counter, right? So very pointed advertisements like this, telling people from the FBI, from other departments at the federal level, specifically the military intelligence division, just saying, do not talk. A couple more newspapers here. Advertisements from companies that just completely turn towards the war effort. So like the Pennsylvania Railroad there, the spirit of 1943. You see Uncle Sam's ready to fight. In the middle there, just another example of some of the soldiers that we would have seen. And then I really love the cartoon. It's fantastic. So if you see here, so you've got this nurse in the window who's kind of holding up a V or a number 2, and they're in the maternity ward there, and the guy says, she sees I'm a soldier, Joe. Tell me she means V for victory and not twins. So a little levity, right, in all of this. Some more picnics being held at Idora Park from McKelvey's and Klein's. So like I said, life kind of continues in some ways, and then in some ways we take really hard left turns, like Mussolini being captured. So this is in July of 1943. Mussolini is taken prisoner. Italy at this point essentially falls, and its fascist government will no longer be in power. So we're going to talk a little bit now about mill work, what's happening in the mills. Most of us are going to be familiar with stories of women going to the mills to work. Of course, men are going to continue working. There are some men who actually receive, what's the word I want to use? Like exceptions, where they could stay, or deferments, where they could stay in their positions because their positions were so vital to the war effort. So they did not have to be in the draft, they did not have to enlist. But so many of them did that got to keep these mills running, and women are going to head in droves to the factory floor. Now, a lot of people are going to refer to them as Rosie the Riveter because of the famous artwork. I think that really limits the work that women did. Women did not just rivet, they did everything. So remember that. There are so many stories. The Youngstown Steel Museum has done incredible research on women who worked at the mills during the war, and I would highly recommend you taking a look at some of those stories that they have. So we have stories like Carrie Peterson, who was a tool tender at Youngstown Sheet and Tube. She stated that her war production job was her very first time in the mill, and then, and this is her quote, she says, "I find the work very interesting, and since we can't do our work on the battlefront, we'll do it right here at home." Other women would note that if they could have joined the military, they would have, but they are limited in that role, so they are going to work at the mills instead. Another woman here notes, "I like the experience as a crane operator, but I didn't like the idea of having to do it because of a war." And I think that's probably the most honest statement, right? She likes the work, she hates the reason why. All right. So we have more pictures, people in the mills. Again, I could have put hundreds of these on the screen. Another set here. I like this quote as well. "We can't all be in the front lines, but we can help those who are there." So this is a photo from 1944. This is the School of Nursing at St. Elizabeth's. These are their graduates. I gotta wonder how many of them are going to be heading into military service. So whether it's going to be at a base here in the United States, or whether it's heading overseas, or to a Navy ship, something like that. Few soldier stories that I'll share with you here. The first you see there with the South Pacific headline. This is Private First Class William Howe. He was fighting in New Guinea, and he recalled, "Waiting for the first drawn attack on the island. The men were scared, all of them. They knew the landing would cost many lives. Most of them pretended it didn't matter. But there was a wrestler with a wife and children who broke down and pled with the chaplain that he didn't want to die. Another boy was terrified and couldn't be forced to leave the ship. The others were scared, but they went in anyway because they knew it was what had to be done. The other story you see there is Technical Sergeant Donald L. Snyder from Warren. He received a Distinguished Service Cross for his actions in helping to put out fires aboard a plane. The fires had been spreading and could have reached the bombs that were loaded onto the plane. Who knows how many lives would have been lost had the fire reached the bombs and ammunition that were on the plane. The fire started from enemy fire, from Nazi German fire. So we're going to head now, excuse me, to June of 1944 and D-Day. So massive front page articles here, looking at the invasion into France and trying to push the Nazi forces back towards Germany. So there are some great articles here from the Vindicator, and I'm going to share one of those with you now. So it says, first reports of the Allied invasion of Europe were received with skepticism by Youngstowners early this morning. Those comparatively few Youngstowners that were awake at 1:30 a.m. Following the official announcement 2 hours later, the news was received calmly. People were not shocked by the announcement, they had expected it. Another article says there was no rejoicing. They knew that loved ones were fighting and might be dying. There was a general air of relief that the long-expected battle had begun at last. In some parts of the city, news of the invasion flashed during the night. Lights came on, and homes and radios were turned on to bring in every word of reports from various news sources. So people really gathering around to hear about this. Another article says all churches are open today for prayers. The invasion of Hitler's fortress has finally begun. From springboards where men and materials have been gathered for months, Allied soldiers are storming the European fortress. Men will die. Others will be wounded, some slightly and some crippled for life. Those men need spiritual support and prayers. In preparation for this, the churches of Youngstown are calling for citizens to gather and pray today. So I'm going to share with you a couple of stories about some of those soldiers involved with D-Day. So the first group of four that you see there, those are the Clayton brothers. This is from the June 7th, 1944 issue of the Vindicator. And these are the four sons of Mr. and Mrs. William Clayton, Sergeant Henry, Corporal William Jr., Private Marcus. They were all former Republic Steel workers. And then Private First Class William C. Clayton, who was a former employee of the Westinghouse Company in Pittsburgh. Now to talk a little bit about the service of African Americans in the war effort. By 1940, the Navy had about 4,000 African American sailors, which was just 2.3% of its total manpower. The number increased to nearly 5,000, more than 5,000 in early 1942, following the attacks at Pearl Harbor. Now, black women were not allowed into the Navy until 1945, and even then, only 4 African American women served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. The Marine Corps allowed recruitment of African Americans beginning in June of 1942. At first, they received segregated training and served in all-black units, though battalions would integrate by the end of the war. Nearly 8,000 black Marines served in the Pacific Theater, performing particularly well in the Battle of Saipan in September of 1944. After the war, the Marine Corps scaled back, resulting in only about 2,000 remaining black Marines in the service. So there's a lot of history of black soldiers in World War II, and I would encourage you to look into their incredible service. We also have in the middle there the Yankovics brothers. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is from the June 8th issue. This is another set of 4 brothers, Staff Sergeant Michael, Private William, Private John, and Private First Class Andrew. They were all from Youngstown. They were among one of those lists of local soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen. We also have here Private First Class Edward Loswego. He was wounded when his glider crash landed in France. He received chest and leg injuries and was sent back to England. And he was a Struthers High School graduate who had already served in Europe. A couple other ones here. This is Sergeant Andrew W.L. Schill. He was a paratrooper with the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment in the 101st Airborne. He was killed on June 6th, the day of the invasion. He worked at Commercial Shearing and Stamping Company before enlisting in 1942. You can see his grave there. This is Lieutenant Stuart F. Wise, who's from Youngstown. He's killed in action on June 14th after surviving the initial invasion. He served in the Engineer Corps and was among the first to invade on June 6th. In a letter to his parents on June 12th, he wrote of his experience in gaining control of the beach, stating there is no soldier to match those guys from Main Street, USA. They fight like demons. He also says it's horrible, and I'm hoping this is over quick. I'll never forget that first day. And he will be killed just 2 days later on June 14th. So following D-Day, we see a big amp up in news coverage, in advertisements like these that are really pushing people towards war bonds, towards war effort. You know, for the first time now, we have Allied soldiers on the ground in Europe, and we know that this is going to be the bulk of at least the European side of the European theater of this war. This is June 12th. You see we're pushing further into France. Now we're going to fast forward a couple of months to late 1944, and we're going to head into Belgium. So starting on December 16th, with the onset of winter, the German army had launched a counteroffensive that was intended to cut through the Allied forces in a manner that would turn the tide in Hitler's favor. This is going to be around the Belgian very small town of Bastogne. Becomes known as the Battle of the Bulge. This is going to take 41 days, beginning on December 16th, 1944, and ending on January 25th, 1945. I have a lot of personal connections with the Battle of Bastogne, the Battle of the Bulge. My family in Belgium lived very close to this area, so they have some rather rough stories, which I'll share a little bit later with you. I've also been able to visit Bastogne. If you ever find yourself in Belgium, please head to the Ardennes. Please go to southern Belgium and see this area. Now, tucked a little bit deeper into that newspaper, in early January, we're going to see this story continue, where General McCulloch gives his very famous response to the German call for surrender, which is his single word, which is nice, exactly. So I love that. It's one of my favorite single word quotes in history. And I do love the quote. I don't know if it's a real quote or if it's from Band of Brothers, where they're like, we're paratroopers, we're supposed to be surrounded. But so the Allied forces will hold out the Battle of the Bulge. Now we're going to backtrack just a hair to 1942, and then also in 1945. Because looking back now, we have clear vision. We know what's happening in Nazi Germany. We know the ultimate goal of the Nazi regime. At the time, reports are very slowly coming in. So the first article you see there that kind of has that blue highlight at the top, which I could not get off the screen. This is from December 20th of 1942. It's a United Press article coming out of London, talking about Jewish people that have been killed, and you see there reported only 1,000 left alive in Yugoslavia. So we're starting to see some news here. You see at the bottom there talking about the possibility that another 5 million could face extermination. So these news articles are starting to flow in about what becomes known as the final solution, but not as much as we're going to see towards the end. Now, April 11th of 1945, and we have here a news article coming out of the press corps writer, the Associated Press Corps writer, talking about 5 million Jews that had been gassed and cremated in places like Auschwitz. So we see some of these stories coming in. So this is out there. People know what's happening, and as more and more information comes out, more will be shared. April 13th, 1945, the nation wakes to the news that President Roosevelt has died. You see this article here. We have the information about his death, Truman taking over as president, some other military things happening. And we could do multiple presentations just on April of 1945. I keep saying 1945. But we would be here all day. So, I want to take a look at this. This is also coming around the same time. This was a 2-day spread in the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company Bulletin, looking at the raw materials and then the output in steel mills. And you can see some of the things here. Look at how much water you're using, how many tons of raw material, how much electricity they are using to fund or to power these mills. We see enough to supply 17 million families with electricity, natural gas for 14 million families. But then you look at the output here, how many tons of steel is being headed towards construction, towards containers, for agriculture, direct war jobs, and so on. So just a really great informational graphic there about what the steel industry is producing. Another one that we have here, this is from General Fireproofing. Thought this was kind of fascinating. This looks at the seats that were created at General Fireproofing with information about their good form aluminum aircraft seats that were being used by both Army and Navy aircrafts. So they have multiple pages looking at the different types of seats, the different types of airplanes, and how they were kind of using the basis of office furniture that they had been creating for years and transitioning that to the war effort. It's kind of cool, right? All right, let's go to May 2nd, 1945. I wanted to share this first. So I really thought I was going to have time to show you clips from this, but I know myself, and I knew I wasn't going to have time to do that. So this is a documentary that was put together by the War Information Office, created by United Press, or United Films, and it's called Steel Town. And it's available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Youngstown Steel Town. It's about maybe 12-15 minutes long, and it is a really fantastic look at what life was like in Youngstown in 1944. You're going to see family stories, downtown shots, you're going to see shopping, mills, a lot of great mill shots. Like I said, I really thought I was going to have time, but I know better than that now. If you want to see this, we could start playing it later, but you're welcome to take a look at this on your own. Now let's head to May of 1945. So we have this headline here saying that Hitler's quote-unquote dead. We don't totally know yet. And that information is going to take a day or two to confirm. But there's a very interesting article that is also on this same front page. And it reads, Hitler's death causes little excitement here. News of Hitler's death caused very little excitement in Youngstown theaters Tuesday evening. At one downtown movie, the Nazi Report, hang on, my eyes are getting old. The Nazi Report was given in a regular news broadcast heard from its stage. Nobody seemed to care, theater officials on duty remarked. There was no applause, no laughter. I got the feeling none of them believed it. Here's this article here. Tight schedules at a second theater house precluded announcements of the news, but patrons arriving at the late show had heard it. They too expressed doubt as to the truth of the story. And then take a look at this last quote here. Remind me to go to Argentina someday and get Hitler's autograph. I know, right? That's a great quote. So they already know that Nazi officials are heading to Argentina to escape any face of justice. Just 2 days later, May 4th, 1945, Nazis are set to surrender Saturday in Denmark, Holland, and in Germany. You see there are no trace of Hitler. The Chancellery is on fire. Eisenhower saying we'll fight till the end. So it's just nonstop news coverage here. May 6th of 1945, buried a little bit deep in the paper, we have information about concentration and death camps coming out from national and international sources. This one coming from DocAt. Some quotes here that I'll share with you from this entire article read, we've got to make the folks at home realize what has been going on over here. And then the author himself says, "I've seen so much of war, there is no good in it, but killing, the wounded, filth, and the cold calculated desire to kill others, all is cleanliness compared to the practices in Nazi prison camps. That is not the work of a few sadists, it is calculated mass murder." So these are the articles coming in. May 7th, 1945, the headline reads, "Germany surrenders to Allies and Russia." So in Youngstown, most folks celebrated the news together. The presidential announcement was hardly finished before the city's church bells rang. At St. Columba Cathedral, a trumpet sounded taps, while 24 altar boys held lit torches in the shape of a V. At Central Square, people were gathered around a speaker to listen to the announcement. Initially, the group was silent, listening intently to President Truman. Women began to cry. People leaned out of office windows to hear the speech. This is kind of interesting. A painter standing on a roof stood motionless with his brush in his hand. A group of about 20 teenage boys clung to the sides of an old car, shouting and singing as they drove down Federal Street. Bits of confetti flowed from windows of the Home Savings and Loan building, and a downtown business owner locked his doors and told his employees, "No work today. This may mean my boy comes home." Oh, I know, right? But we also know it's not over. So we have a fantastic political cartoon here of an Allied hand just slamming down on a copy of Mein Kampf. But then another article from the front page saying, "News causes joy, but people warn, don't forget about Japan. We are still fighting the Pacific. It is not over. Yes, we have a massive victory in the Eastern theater, but it is not done." Now the mayor will have a proclamation, and you can read some of that here, talking about the joy and relief which will deservedly come to our citizens upon the advent of V-Day, which we will now know as VE Day, Victory of Europe. Hereby proclaim the holy character of this day and call upon our citizens to gather in their respective churches and synagogues or nearby places of worship to give thanks unto God for the blessing of the coming of this day, to offer prayers of penitence and intercession, and to dedicate themselves unto the high and hold responsibility of helping to establish a just and enduring peace. But we're not done. That's in August of 1945, and we have the atomic bomb being dropped on Hiroshima. August 14th, 1945, Japan will officially surrender, and World War II will end. But it is not until September 2nd, 1945, that Japan will sign terms of surrender, and Truman calling it the J-Day, Victory in Japan. Churches around the area held special services for those who really needed a moment to mark the end of all of it. So, marking the end of all of it gave everyone a chance to really come back and reflect. And that's what we're going to see in these next couple of slides. So this is from General Fireproofing's bulletin. You see the full page there, and I zoomed in a bit. And I'm going to read this to you. It says, "The war is over. The shooting has ended. Men have quit dying like flies on the various battlefields. Airplanes no longer take off with loads of death, which they drop on helpless men, women, and children hundreds of miles from the fighting fronts. Ships no longer disappear under calm water from the mortal wounds of a torpedo fired by a lurking submarine, or go down from the blast of a kamikaze plane. For more than 3 years and 8 months, the United States was at war, a war which involved most of the entire world. For nearly 2 years before, it was preparing for war, getting ready to meet an enemy which had indicated that it was going to draw this country into the conflict." Also from Youngstown Sheet 2, we have the total service members from just Youngstown Sheet 2. You see we're 4,300 from the Youngstown district, 2,500 from Chicago's district, totaling nearly 7,000 service members from Youngstown Sheet 2. This is the list of the local Youngstown Sheet 2 deaths. So 80 men out of the Campbell Works, 25 out of Briar Hills Works, for a total of 105 Youngstown Sheet 2 casualties of war. I'm going to share with you just some more of those faces. You see men, women, all colors, all creeds, coming together. This is the Cheney High School yearbook from 1944. They know more than 600 alumni who were enlisted and remembered those killed in action, missing, taken prisoner, and wounded. They also had this plaque put up in their school. This is very common in all of the yearbooks in the war era. From 1946, this is Campbell Memorial's high school yearbook. You'll know that they have images, they've tried to gather images of every casualty of war, but right there it says, we're sincerely sorry, there's almost a physical impossibility to get the necessary information and picture of all of these men. But the next thing I want to share with you is on the next about 8 or 10 pages of the Campbell yearbook is a full list of everyone from Campbell who enlisted and served. Exactly. We could have done this for every community. These are the types of things we're seeing in these yearbooks and newsletters and so on. Now, if we thought we were getting emotional, hold your horses. Because I'm going to take a nice little left turn. I'm going to talk about my family for a minute. The only Youngstown connection they have is me, so it counts. This is my grandfather. This is Dean Arlington Manning. This is my dad's dad. He was a CB, served in the United States Navy. He enlisted right as he turned 17, ended up graduating high school early, enlisted in the Navy, served in Okinawa, served in the Pacific. He was a CB, he built barges. We have these great photographs of him. Good looking kid, wasn't he? I know. Tall and skinny. Where did those genes go? I could have been a model, right? Anyway, all of us complain that none of us got his tall, skinny genes, which is very funny. But we have some of his letters that he wrote. The 2 letters you see there, he wrote to his brother Lyle in May, and I think they both were May of 1945, when he was in Japan. In one of them, he talks about being a pincushion with how many shots he had to get. He also really jabs his brother Lyle for lying about the size of the fish that he caught, which I just think is great. Basically saying, you're going to have to show me that fish whenever I get home because I don't believe you. And just a really great piece that we have there of my Grandpa Dean. Now on the flip side, my mom's side, my grandfather, Darwin Walker, he served in the United States Army. He enlisted following Pearl Harbor. He was a truck mechanic, and he worked kind of behind the lines in the European theater, repairing trucks and tanks and those sorts of things. And he was stationed in Belgium through much of early 1945, and that is where he met my grandmother. And there's a great article here that talks about my grandmother meeting another war bride, the 2 of them having conversations. My grandmother came to the United States on May 19th, 1946. You see her immigration papers there, the manifest of the Zebulon Vance. She was just 18 years old when she married my grandfather and moved here to the United States. All right, that's my little personal angle, and I managed to not cry. All right, this is from Youngstown Sheet 2, President Frank Purnell, December of 1945. We're going to wrap this up. I have no idea what time it is. I don't know how long I've been talking.
5 minutes.
Woo! All right. Thank you, Jess. Okay, we got a couple more things to do. So, December 1945 here says, we are very glad at this holiday season that the major wars of the world have ended. For some folks, this will be a season of much joy and happiness because of the return of their loved ones from the armed services, and we join with them in the spirit of thanksgiving for their return. May we all pause a moment in reverence to those who have made the supreme sacrifice, and let us hope that those whose loved ones have not returned will find some peace and contentment in the spirit of Christmas. To all employees of this company and their families, the officers and management extend a happy holiday greeting. A couple more really random things to share with you. Following the war, McKelvey's installed escalators. That's kind of fun. $250,000 worth of escalators downtown at McKelvey's. But you'll also notice that students at both the Cheney and Grant school districts have been hit with polio. All right, I know. All right, it's also happening in late 1945, Youngstown Sheet Tube celebrated its 45th anniversary. So there's a lot of history about them hitting that mark. December 24th, 1945, information that Edward Mooney, who had a parish here of St. Patrick's Church in Youngstown, he had lived here when he was younger as well. He had been named a cardinal by Pope Pius. That was nice. Front page news there. On June 8th of 1947, a massive tornado comes through the area, kills 5 people in the Sharon area, and kind of just over into Trumbull County as well. Now, we could spend a whole lot of time talking about the Taft-Hartley Act, which was passed in the summer of 1947. This news comes out on June 23rd of 1947. I am not a legal historian. I am not a political historian per se. So what I understand of the Taft-Hartley Act is essentially this. It is going to limit the types of strikes that employees and unions can take. It kind of puts a little bit more power into the hands of management, though the excuse was that it made it more fair, so that workers could not do specific types of strikes and really shut down a factory. This is going to have big implications. In 1952, with the Supreme Court case Youngstown Sheet and Tube versus Sawyer, which Dante may or may not talk about next month in the 1950s, so stay tuned for that. But 2 more things to share with you. We're going to head back to Youngstown Sheet and Tube for another full-page article, because Tilly passed away in 1947. I know! I knew that was going to get the biggest reaction today. I actually cried. So, I'm going to read a little bit of this to you here. So she passed away at the age of 10. You see here it says, with the roar of machinery together with the hustle and bustle of the mill, it did not bother Tilly in the least. She was more perturbed when they were idle and welcomed the startup with a snappy walk as she treaded her way around, sort of checking up as it were. When meat and other foods were scarce during the war years, workers always managed to save a choice morsel for Tilly. So this was sad time for the guys over there at the tube mill at Camel Works. And I'm going to leave you all with the last arrest in 1949, December 31st of 1949. This was a guy named Boyson Gray, and he was arrested, you can see there, on a $10,000 bond for burglary and larceny. You want to know what he stole? A radio and a suit from his roommate. That's it. I couldn't find any articles about what happened to him, but he was in jail on a $10,000 bond. And that is your last arrest from 1949. Do you have any questions I can try to answer? Wow, did I cover that one? Yes, please.
I was wondering if you know why your grandparents got married 3 times in Belgium?
So my grandparents were married multiple times in Belgium because they had a religious ceremony, a civil ceremony, and an American ceremony. So that it was fully legal, so that she could legally move to the United States with no problem. Yeah. So they did divorce, though. He wasn't the best guy. But it's the truth. I never knew him. I never knew my actual grandfather. But her second husband, my step-grandfather, he and I were attached to the hip. He was my favorite person. He passed away when I was 3. I still remember him. And he was a really good guy. So my grandma did get a wonderful, happy life after all. So, yeah. Yes, Cassie?
Do you have information about women who worked in the mills during the war?
Yeah, so a lot of the information I pulled from women working in the mills actually comes from research at the Steel Museum. They did a great effort in not only gathering stories from the time and doing a lot of oral histories, So that would be a good place to look there. I shared a couple of these stories today, but yeah, Marcel Wilson really nailed the research on that. Yeah, yes.
Okay, related to that, then, our aunt, was a crane operator at Republic.
Yeah.
And she talked about how when she took the test, that she had to, she had to hit the target and that, and they were really amazed for the woman to do that.
Don't you love that? Oh, a woman can do the work? Wow. Yeah. That's why I shared that one quote where she said she loves the job, she just hated the reasons why she had to do it. She hated that there was a war going on, but she loved being able to do the work. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I have a comment on the Rose of the River thing. I was watching the show the other day about Black and Decker. And that's why the tools were always industrial. Then when the Rosie the River started working there, they had to make them lighter weight. And then they dropped them into the houses.
Makes sense. Yeah.
But that's not my question. That's just how I like to share that.
Fair, yeah.
It's interesting, because they were big, huge drills and everything.
Yeah.
And they brought them down to the stuff, but Rosie could use them,
Mhm.
and they eventually went into the house. But I noticed on one of the signs of the article, he said they were called colorful streetlights. Why were they named as colorful?
I have no idea. So I saw that in the article. I have no idea if that was a nickname, if it was a business name. I'm not sure. But I can give you that date if you want to go take a look at it more specifically.
I
Yeah.
have another question.
Sure.
There was another thing, they spelled Tokyo with an I.
Could be just a misprint, could be just a typo, could be a different spelling of it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I will say, like Jess just said, they're putting this stuff out so fast. Not only did they have daily papers, there were afternoon issues that came out, there were extras that came out. So these poor editors are just taking Associated Press articles, put them on a thing, print them and go. It is nonstop. And some of these newspapers are 50, 60 pages long as well. Yeah, yeah. All right, well, thank you all so much. I'll turn it back to Jess.
Tracy, this is a great presentation, lots of wonderful primary sources there that you guys can check out in the archives. Don't forget to come back next month, May 15th, we've got All Shook Up, Reshaping the Steel Valley in the 1950s with Dante Bernard, our museum educator here at the PHS. Thanks and have a great day, everyone.